First is that he believes that the Hindutva that he subscribes to, or the Hinduness that he subscribes to, is that of Swami Vivekananda. I'm actually happy you said that, because while Swami Vivekananda was happy to speak of universalism and universal brotherhood from the podium of the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, he was very, very clear that universalism cannot come at the expense of pixelation of history, and certainly specific disagreements, theological disagreements, which resulted in constant practice of exactly this value called toleration, this civilizing, condescending virtue called toleration, which was resulting in the proselytization of Indians en masse. So much so that at least in two of his works, I'm sure you're aware of it, sir, where he specifically refers to his encounter with a Christian missionary on a ship either back to or from India, where a Christian missionary was constantly spewing venom against the religion of Satan, which is Hinduism. Swami Vivekananda, despite his belief in universal brotherhood, was forced to catch the Christian missionary by the scruff of his collar and threaten him with throwing him overboard. If I may say so, that according to me is Hindutva, or Hindu resistance in action, which is to say, I'm more than happy to accommodate all your points of view, provided you first stop spewing venom against me in the name of your scripture. So the very same Swami Vivekananda, I'm so happy that you've actually cited him, also went on to identify in, let's say, book after book after book, in fact in several tomes, the history of invasions from the 8th century, at least until the 16th century. And this is something that he has never pixelated. So the great thing about these stalwarts or civilizational icons is that they were very clear that there is no inconsistency between recognition of the universal character of dharma and what dharmic communities and civilizations have been subjected to in the name of vidharma. Let's not call it adharma, let's call it vidharma. This is something that is starkly missing, and that's exactly what I've pointed in my book, which is to say that there is a filter called coloniality or colonial consciousness, which actively prevents this particular country, and specifically the majority of this country, from accessing specific aspects of its past and putting it in deep slumber in the name of secularism, because just as you have a problem with, let's say, the concept of tolerance, so to speak, European history, and I'm absolutely sure you're aware of this, is specifically clear about the Christian origins and Christian nature of secularism itself. Such being the case, I think when this particular community stands up and says, I have had enough of secularism, and I've had enough of this inclusivity that is specifically telling me forget everything, you keep citing Dalits, you keep citing everybody else, but you don't wish to talk about the treatment of Kashmiri Hindus and the specific causes behind it. You don't wish to talk about what exactly has happened in Bengal immediately after elections from the 2nd of May. You don't wish to talk about, let's say, certain pockets being created in Assam in the name of religion, dare I say. You don't wish to talk about what is, according to me, the longest running insurgency in this country, which is the creation of a crown colony in the northeast, and therefore there is Nagalim for something. Please Google up what they specifically are fighting for. It's Nagalim for, and a religious figure is specifically mentioned. With all these insurgencies going on, surprisingly, it is the Hindu who is the constant subject of scrutiny, whereas everybody else is spared scrutiny and the rod. So therefore the point is, the Hindu has proved herself, not himself, herself, because Sabrimala, herself, to be more than open to reform in every possible way, because way before untouchability was abolished under Article 17 of the Constitution, the temple entry movement was initiated by the Maharaja of Travancore in 1936. That was already done. So several people, inward-looking people, were more than happy, if at all the Dharma Shastras warranted it, they were more than happy to say, we have to move on. So therefore, I'm merely saying that this particular community perhaps doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and it gets, let's say, more scrutiny than it deserves, whereas everybody else is spared scrutiny. That's point number one. Point number two, any concept must be understood, as Dr. Tharoor rightly points out, in historical context. I completely understand. But it should not be divorced from the unique cultural experience and historical experience of any community. So nationalism, when spouted by a European who's fundamentally a colonizer, is not the same as nationalism from Savarkar or anybody else who is the victim of colonization at the end of the day, who has witnessed two successive waves of colonization running for at least 1400 years. So to say that when we speak of nationalism, it's the same as European supremacism, I'm sorry to say, is to compare apples with oranges, where you're divorcing the entire history and focusing exclusively on the statement. Here, when we speak of nationalism, it is merely a call for throwing off the yoke of colonialism of two kinds. Therefore, this should not be compared with Europeans for the simple reason that you're comparing the victim with the oppressor and the aggressor. That, according to me, there couldn't have been a greater insult to a victimized and a colonized community. That's point number two. And I'll just make one more point, which is Constitution. Of course, it's a fine document, it's a great document, it must be worshipped. Yes, I get all of that. But the point is, Dr. Ambedkar, after having crafted this constitution, during the Nehruvian dispensation, rues the fact that he actually created this constitution because he was seeing it distorted under the Nehruvian dispensation, and he says very clearly that I regret the day that I was given this particular task of having to draft this particular document, because now I realize that a terrible piece of document can be used for the betterment of the people in the hands of good people, but a fantastic piece of document and legal document can be completely misused in the hands of scoundrels. I don't, and this I'm not even paraphrasing, I'm using his words exactly. So therefore, the fact of the matter is, the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution regretted having to live during his lifetime to see the Constitution and its values being completely thrown to the winds. That's point number three. And the last point that I think is extremely important is the reference to Diana Eck, her book called India, a Sacred Geography. Surprisingly, when she refers to India, a Sacred Geography, she chooses not to refer to it as Bharat. She still focuses on India, which is exactly why I decided to call my book India, that is Bharat, because Article 1 speaks of India, that is Bharat. Unfortunately, Bharat has been effectively relegated to the margins, whereas India is currently surviving at the expense of Bharat. The problem is, if you look at the introduction of Diana Eck's book, because I've had the specific opportunity to deal with it in my book, she recognizes the fact that as far as this country is concerned, it was created as a consequence of a network of pilgrimage centers. And therefore, there's a triple matrix of nature, culture, faith, epistemology, and patriotism coming together to create this entity called Bharat. But there again, she says, but Hindu nationalism, no. So the problem is, it's surprising that she regurgitates the very same scholarship of Radhakumar Mukherjee of 1914. She comes out with the very same scholarship on sacred geography of Jadunath Sarkar, of R.C. Majumdar. But we are more than happy to cite a foreign scholar by the name Diana Eck as opposed to Radhakumar Mukherjee, Jadunath Sarkar, or R.C. Majumdar, which, according to me, is proof of coloniality or colonial consciousness, so to speak, that we still seek the validation of someone sitting in Harvard. So it has to be someone of Indian origin educated abroad, or it has to be preferably a Westerner who's educated abroad, all of them telling us, of course you're great, you have our validation, you have our blessings. So that's exactly why I said, perhaps we should have, let's say, a face-off as far as India, that is Bharat, and the Battle of Belonging is concerned, simply because Diana Eck represents everything that is wrong with Western academia. She, according to me, represents what's happening on the September 11th, which is dismantling Global Hindutva Conference.